Having set up the way Photoshop manages color, we now need to set up Adobe Camera Raw. There's one or two important settings we need to apply to that before we start processing all our images. So I'm going to select on any image, that one there, Control R. That will open that image into Camera Raw. And we can see at the top, Camera Raw 7.1. Right, up here we've got the Preferences dialog box. And if we open that, I'll just drag that into the image. You can see up here we've got Save Image Settings In. Now whenever we apply settings, change settings using all these controls to an image, they are saved as a separate little instructional file. And at the moment, all those little files will be sent to a database, a central repository. I prefer to have that set to Sidecar XMP files, and that means that these little files, which are called XMP files, are actually stored in the same folder as your photograph, and that can make moving images and things like that a lot simpler. You don't really need to understand all this lot because it all happens in the background, but just trust me, that is usually the best setting to apply. Apply sharpening to. You can apply pre-sharpening to images within Camera Raw, and it's a really good idea because it's a very powerful and effective way of applying a little bit of sharpening before we start processing the images. At the moment we've got Preview Images Only selected, which means that you'll see the effect applied in this window here. However, when it's sent to Photoshop by opening the image, any pre-sharpening you did in the image would be dumped and not rendered in the image. So we need to set that to all images. That way any pre-sharpening we apply here will be sent to Photoshop as part of the image. At the bottom here, as I mentioned in my book, Camera Raw can now process JPEG and TIFF files within the RAW converter. That might sound a little bit daft, but actually it's a very good way of carrying out further adjustments to an image, because all these controls are probably more intuitive than going the Photoshop route, and all the adjustments you make are applied as a coding, a separate file, separate adjustment file. So the actual underlying image is not affected by any of the changes we make through these controls. You can go back and undo it again, as long as you're operating through Adobe Camera Raw. So to enable that, we need to set to automatically open all supported JPEGs, and if you wish to do automatically all TIFFs as well. So that way when we're in Bridge and we open a JPEG or a TIFF file, it will open through Camera Raw, and we can apply all these changes if we'd like to, before sending it on to Photoshop. So I'm going to say OK on that one. At the bottom here we've got the workflow options. These are really important because this is the way Camera Raw will send the image when we open it up into Photoshop. It will have applied ProPhoto RGB color space. It will be in a 16-bit per channel file, and it will be rendered at 300 pixels per inch. So for Pictures to Exe, we need to change that. Just drag that in again. The color space, as I've explained in my book, we can Pictures to Exe can only accept an sRGB color space. Any of the other color spaces that are down there will be rendered incorrectly. Mostly they'll be rendered in a flat sort of, they'll look flat and the colors won't look correct. Bit depth, because we'll be saving it as a JPEG file, we need to set that to 8 bits per channel, because that's the only bit depth that a JPEG file can handle. Size, that's the size of my camera's the sensor, so that'll be different for your camera probably. Resolution, this makes no odds in Pictures to Exe. I'm going to change that to 72 pixels per inch. If you're going to produce a picture, a show in PowerPoint, by applying 72 pixels per inch, that will ensure that when you drag an image into PowerPoint, it should size itself to the size of the slide. If you put 300 pixels per inch, it tends to come in as a much smaller image, and you then have to change the size of it, which is another work stage, to get it to fit the slide. So I usually set that to 72 pixels per inch. We can leave all the other settings as is and click OK. And we should see that our workflow options have now changed to sRGB, 8 bits per channel, 72 pixels per inch. So these are sticky settings, what we've done up there, down there and up there. And if we select done now, those settings will be set in stone. Well, until we decide to change them again. If we just press cancel, these settings here will revert back to what we just had. So it's important we just click done on that. We then go back to bridge. If we open up another image, we can see the settings are the same there, and our settings up here are the same as what we've just gone and changed. So all you've got to do now is say open image, and all of those settings will be applied to the image on sending to Photoshop.